Yes. Thank you everyone for joining us for another one of our virtual conversations. We're so excited to have James and Dr. Acosta here to discuss a lot of stuff. I think it's going to be a really fun and diverse and interesting conversation to learn about James. There were some guidelines and event rules that were on the webpage and when you registered. So just a reminder, we're going to follow by those, and if any of them are violated, you might be removed. We haven't had any problems at any of our other events, but just want to put that out there. Also, a little YWCA plug. Next week, we start our virtual Race Against Racism. It's our 11th Race Against Racism, but for obvious reasons, it's gone virtual. So we have, Dr. Costa has some of the stuff that we have, Eliminate Racism t-shirts, all kinds of stuff to share our mission and also support our programs that we have for eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity, and some face masks, of course, because that's the world we live in now. So I'm going to put that link where you can register in the chat if anybody's interested, and we appreciate your support. All right, I'll hand it off to you, Dr. Acosta. I'll turn off my video, and I'll be monitoring the questions, the Q&A, the chat, and if anything relevant comes up to what you're discussing, I'll turn my video on, I'll pop back up, and ask those questions.
Well, thank you very much, Kayla. Welcome to everybody. This is our fourth Courageous Conversation. Today we have, well, let me first tell you, I always forget to do this, but I have to talk about the mission of the YWCA and why they're called Courageous Conversations. So the mission of the YWCA is to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And so we started these Courageous Conversations to really talk about issues of importance and matters that we feel would interest our community in El Paso. So today I'm very excited to introduce James Harkness. James is from El Paso. He went to Bel Air High School. He's a Navy veteran. And he is a Grammy-nominated actor for his show on Broadway, which I was fortunate enough to go see. I think I saw it like a week before it premiered. I just happened to be in New York, and I texted James, and I was able to see it, and it's amazing. And so he was Grammy-nominated for Ain't Too Proud. And so I'd like to introduce James Harkness from one Highlander to another Highlander, and welcome all of you that are here today. So James, welcome. Can you talk to us? Tell us about Ain't Too Proud and your great Broadway show and your Grammy nomination. Talk to us about that.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? It's so...
Muy bien, gracias.
Look, I don't speak Spanish as often as I used to, but it's still there. Look, when you're from El Paso, it is part of your life forever, and I'm always grateful to that. Speaking of Spanish, it's just interesting because we had to take Spanish from elementary school up through junior high school, and I don't know if they still do that, but I'm so glad that they did that because it gives me a language that I can use when I need to. So it's nice to see you. Thank you for having me here. I think what you're doing is an incredible thing. You are actually a force of nature, and it's been really wonderful to talk to you and just learn about the things that you are doing and to hear the determination in your voice, because you truly, truly want to help people and make change. And that is an incredibly powerful thing. So I am really, truly glad to be here.
Well, thank you so much. So James, you're on Broadway.
I am.
Awesome. And you know, everybody talks about Khalid and all this, and nobody text me or tell me anything. I love my Khalid. But let me tell you.
And don't say anything, because then people are going to be like, who's this guy? We know who that guy is.
No, but you're on Broadway. That is a big, big deal. Tell us about your show.
Ain't Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations is a show chronicling how the Temptations met all the way up through their rise to stardom, and the show leaves off around the 70s. But it still also talks a great deal about their brotherhood and how these men formed one of the greatest, if not the greatest, R&B group of all time. You know, out of all of those groups, you know the Temptations. If you say the Temptations across the board, everyone knows the Temptations, even younger kids today. And if they don't know the Temptations, they know my girl, talking about my girl. They know that song because it is one of those classic songs by the Temptations. So I am so honored that I get to do this show talking about these men and the incredible brotherhood that they formed and their achievements, and how some of those achievements are truly a part of this country, not just the musical part of this country, but the part of how our country progressed. So yeah, I love it. I play Paul Williams, who is one of the founding members of the Temptations. And it is just an absolute blessing to my life, not just being on Broadway, because that within itself is an achievement that I never even knew was going to happen in my life, I'm sorry. And then as I've been on Broadway since 2001, which is when I moved to New York City, I had no idea that something like this could come into my life. Once I really started to understand what Broadway was, because before Broadway came into my life, I didn't really know what Broadway was. I knew about it, but I didn't know what it was, the importance of it, the significance of it. And now that once I became a part of the community and I started to work with all of these like mind-blowing, incredible actors, from my first Broadway show to start, which was Aida, and I was working with the incredible Heather Headley, with Adam Pascal, from so many people know from Rent, and with Sherry Renee Scott, who is just one of these people that I just used to sit and watch her and listen to her, and I was just like, and to like, I can call some of these people friend, and I learned from these people, and this was my introduction into what musical theater was. And when you get into something like this and you see what is possible, then you start dreaming things that you didn't dream before. So I always hoped that I would be a lead in a musical. I went from show to show to show, and I've been very blessed. And I've been in the ensemble. I have like little feature spots here and there that have all really been amazing. And then this moment happens. This moment where I had a conversation with somebody that is true and close to my heart. And we had this very honest conversation. And what was said to me is, hey, you know what? It's probably not going to happen for you, because you're a certain age, and if it hasn't happened to you by now, it's probably just never going to happen. Maybe you didn't make the right connections, maybe this, maybe that. And you know, I took that to heart, and I had a conversation with myself, and I said, if your career ends up being what your career is now, and you do more Broadway shows and you have feature parts and everything like that, and maybe you never make a lead role, will you be okay? And I said, you know what? Yes, because I have done some incredible stuff. I have worked with wonderful people, and it has gotten me to where I was at that point in my life. And I was like, I'm not going to stop trying. I'm definitely going to keep going for it. But if it doesn't come my way, then that just means it wasn't meant to be. But I'm so incredibly blessed. I want
to ask you a quick question about Paul Williams.
Yes. Please do.
So I was reading on one of the reviews for your show that your cast is considered the dream team. And they talk specifically about you playing the part of Paul Williams, who convinced the Temptations that they could dance. And it really brought me back to the fact that you went to Bel Air, you were on the dance team, and the part that you play in Ain't Too Proud is really, I believe, like the heart and soul, like the person who's like the heart and soul of that group that brings them together, that brings that heart together. Can you talk about that particular role? And then I also want to talk about how, you just mentioned that that they had told you that you were probably not going to make it. How did you decide that you were going to go for this role? And what was that process, and how did you kind of put yourself in that frame of mind to be able to move forward?
I'll start there and move into the show. When this moment came around, which is interesting where I was leading to, so look at you. I an audition came up for right there. An audition came up. I was at the time doing Beautiful the Musical, the Carole King story, which was so good, so good. And all the boys in my cast, all the Black boys, were going in for this Temptation project, but me. All these people have been invited to the audition, but me. And I felt some kind of way about it, of course, because I was like, well, if they're being invited, why am I not being invited? So things go down, and people keep talking about it. And then one day, the day before the audition, one of my castmates turns to me and he's like, are you going to this Temptations thing tomorrow or what? And I thought, okay, I know who the choreographer is, so I'm just going to reach out. Sent a text message to Sergio Trujillo, who's the choreographer, incredible. I was like, hey, Sergio, it's been a while, I know. I was like, but I know you're doing this Temptations thing tomorrow, and I would love to be in the room. If not, I totally understand, but I just wanted to put that out there. A minute later, an exact minute later, please come, was the text. So I went, and the journey to getting this role was incredible. Still one of my favorite audition processes I have ever been through, because they really wanted everyone to be good, and you could see the love that they were sharing with us. So once I got the role, which completely blew my mind, and I sat in my living room on the floor over there and cried once my manager said, hey, you got the job. And I put myself, when that door was open to me, I walked through it. And I didn't walk through it without fear, because I understood that I was stepping into something that I hadn't done before. And that definitely brings a lot of fear, because you're ultimately, with me, I'm like, what happens if I fail? And I was afraid of that. Certain times when you do these types of shows, you get, and you'll be the first person that does it, and then they're like, okay, well, that was cool, and then they hire somebody else. And those are the people that make it to Broadway. And I'm so blessed to say that I was able to make it through, and I'm still here, and I get to tell this incredible story about this incredible man. People have said that to me that actually knew him, that he was the heart and the soul of the group. And that I get to play this type of character means a lot, because it is close to my heart. Dance is the root of who I am, and I love it so much. And I did start dancing at Bel Air High School in Mu Delta Chi with Miss Dillon, who was our teacher, Miss Patricia Dillon. And I found a world that spoke to my heart, and that I've been able to follow this journey in my life through dance that has now led me to this role where I get to be the choreographer of this group. Really kind of blows my mind, because it does really speak to who I am as a person and the things that I have been able to do up into this very point in time. So I followed through with my heart. That was the only way that I knew how to do this. And it's been difficult, but it's also been an utter joy. An utter joy.
So one of the things that that happens in this play, and then from this question, I'll move on to some other questions. Really, it touches on civil rights issues and issues of equality in this play. And it's done so well. Can you talk about that, about those issues of equality that kind of come up in this play, and how you might think that relates to what we're going through right now in our country?
Well, it very much relates to right now. You know, the Temptations were coming up to form this group. They were coming from the South, from Alabama, from Georgia, from Texas, which Otis Williams is from Texas. And you have these 5 young Black men who all they wanted to do was sing. And that was the dream. but they're trying to make it in a time where Black people are struggling to make it. They're coming out of a time when slavery is done, but now we're still trying to deal with these Black people in this country being seen as equal. The fight for equality was incredibly strong then. So now we're in the 60s and the 70s, which is when this story is being told. So racism is still at a very, very potent time. And so like there are times when they were playing in auditoriums that were segregated. So there was a rope that went down the middle of the theater. Black people sat on one side, white people sat on the other side. There were also those theaters where white people sat down in the front. They had all the great seats. Black people had to sit up at the very, very top in the balcony, and they couldn't come in through the front of the theater. They had to come in through the back of the theater, walk up a stairway outside of the top of the building, and then go in through the building that way. They weren't even welcome to walk into the front door of the building. And this is the time period that these men were struggling to found themselves. And that situation is still happening in this country today. Black men and Black women, but we can specifically, I guess, talk about Black men right now, as many of the things that we keep seeing happening in this country to young Black men who are trying to just live and make it in this country. So the parallels are there. And we have a moment in the show where our tour bus gets shot at. And it's a very powerful moment in the show. And I have someone asked me the other day, what do you think it's going to feel like when Broadway steps into this new time and we're able to perform again? What is it going to feel like to perform that scene? I have no idea what it's going to feel like. It's been important all this time because so many people have come to me and said, one person who I met in San Francisco where we did the show first, he was like, you know what? I grew up in the civil rights period. He's like, but I'm from a well-to-do white family. I saw things on my side, but until I saw this show, I never really looked at it from the other side because I didn't have to. And so he was like, and that scene on the bus, when you guys are getting shot at, he was like, it shook me. And those things are so important. So I love that we get to tell this story that is set in a time that definitely mirrors today. The Temptations' music is part of the fabric of our community. You know, the music in the 60s was very, very powerful in helping change things at that point in time. And we're there again. We're there at a time when African Americans are fighting to be seen as regular human beings, which is crazy that we're having this kind of conversation right now. You know what I mean? But that we have to have this movement called Black Lives Matter. And it's important, and I'm glad that we're having this movement. But there's also an absurdity that all of these years later, we are fighting these same fights, that police officers are still, like they were doing then, freely shooting Black people because they could. And here we are again. So it is an incredible thing that we get to tell this story that sits so firmly in today, and has since we started doing it in 2017. We have a piece in a part in the show, which you may remember, when Martin Luther King dies. My character, Paul Williams, comes in and brings in the news that Martin Luther King has been shot. We all come down the Temptations and we kneel at the front of the stage. Now, this movement was put into the show not because of Colin Kaepernick. This happened before the situation with Colin happened. This move was already in the show. And it was because you can look up, there's pictures online of people at the funeral and at other places where they are kneeling. When his death happened and it hit our country so hard, there are people, kneeling is a form of respect. You kneel when you ask someone to marry you. You kneel when you get knighted. When it's something that you learn in the military, it is a sign of respect. So that is what it is. But we would have people come up and go, oh, wow, that's amazing that you put that kneel in to represent Colin Kaepernick and what he's going through. I'm like, no. That is not what this is about. But that's the power of the imagery and the story of this show.
And the music goes with that. So I mean the transformation of the music of the Temptations from the beginning and then the middle, right in the middle of the civil rights movement, and then towards the end, you see that evolution of the struggle, because there's even a struggle among the Temptations at that time about where they go with their music. And I thought that was very powerful as well. I mean, I just think that show is just incredible. So I know I have a lot of people that go to New York that are on this webinar. So when Broadway's open, we're all headed to see Ain't Too Proud, because it's an amazing show. So James, I want to take you back a little bit, a lot. I want to take you back to Bel Air. So so for those of you that don't know, people from Bel Air get together every holiday. Like we just get together every holiday, usually at Big Lou's, because that's owned by another Bel Air Highlander. And we were having a conversation there about kind of what this was, I think in December, about what inspired you to join the dance team. And one of the interesting conversations we had really had to do with your mom, and your mom's kind of like, I don't know if that's what you should be doing. But you were on the gymnastics team, or you were doing gymnastics, and then you saw Mu Delta Chi, and tell us about that moment.
Yeah, I was a gymnast. I wasn't on the gymnastics team, but I was taking gymnastics courses, which is something else that I found out that happens in Texas and does not happen in the rest of this country. We're really, really blessed to have grown up in Texas and in El Paso, Texas, for the school curriculum, I'm just saying. So yeah, at the end of the year, we were working for our exhibition. I think I was on the parallel bars, working on something that was cool, but and Mu Delta Chi was down at the bottom of the gym, and they were rehearsing for their dance show at the end of the year. And I was watching them, and I was like, that looks like fun, and I can totally do that. I want to do that. So I went to one of the girls. I don't even remember who. I feel like it was Laura Calderon, I think, but I'm not certain. But I asked, and I was like, how do you get into that? Is there a way to get into that? And they were like, yeah, we have auditions. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went home, and I was like, hey, Mom, can I join the dance team? And initially she was like, nope. And I wore her down. I don't know how many times I asked, but she finally just said, okay. And she allowed me to do it. And it completely changed my life. Like, I'm not even kidding. And I had been dancing Albert Pacheco. I just read that, and it was from Albert Pacheco and Ida Pena. And I love you guys. So, hey.
Hi, Ida and Albert.
Yeah. So it changed my life. It completely changed my life. So I'm grateful that my mom said yes.
So one of the things that one of the questions that we got in advance of this was about the arts curriculum and about like the state of arts curriculums throughout the country. And it was really an interesting question, because it really had a lot to do with also what you and I had talked about, and you just touched upon earlier, about how fortunate we didn't even know what we had when we had it, and how fortunate we were to have the arts curriculum within our high school program. And you mentioned all the arts programs. You want to talk a little bit about your take on that and what you've thought about that?
Well, again, we had what we had. I was just used to it, right? So in high school, of course, like I was in modern dance, so they offered modern dance. They offered drama, because we had Mr. Maldonado, who was the drama teacher. Of course, we had band, we had orchestra. I believe we had a choir. I'm pretty certain that we had a choir. So we had these things that were there if you wanted to do them as your extra like not your main courses, but your extra courses. And so you just, fine. And all the high schools had the same things because the dance teams used to compete against each other. The choirs competed against each other, orchestra, da, 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 da. And it was just part of life. Then I remember getting out into life later on and talking about, oh, I took dance in high school. And some people were like, in high school? And I was like, yeah, you guys didn't have that? And they were like, no. So most people took dance at a dance studio. And I was like, wow. And I really, truly, truly didn't understand how special that is, you know, and it's changed now, you know, because now I remember one of the last times I went back to Bel Air, not the last times, but a few, maybe 5 years prior, to find out that now they have a musical theater program at Bel Air. And I'm like, what?
What?
A musical theater program at Bel Air? What? Okay, that is amazing. You know, like they took the dance and they took the song and they took the acting and they finally melded into what it is. And that blows my mind to know that the school that I came from, that really gave me my footing in dance, because it was the first time I took a structured dance class, aside from just dancing, because I was always dancing. I was always dancing. Even in Hacienda Heights, where I made up a dance and we were in the talent show. You know what I mean? But it's amazing to know that the place that I can really call my foundation for starting dance now has a musical theater program and a theater. There's an actual theater
Yes.
at Bel Air High School.
I haven't seen it, but I heard it's beautiful. Have you seen it?
I saw the outside of it. I stopped the last time I was home, and it was in February. No, it wasn't February. It was December, January in 2018. I was driving by the school, and I had to get out of the car because I was like, there's an actual theater right there. You know where the, what did that say? From Lionel?
Oh, he's gonna get it. He's gonna start a petition to get it named after you. The theater at Bel Air.
You know what? Thank you. I'm just gonna. I don't want to cry or anything, so we're not gonna do that. Yeah, it's just amazing. It's amazing. So it's unfortunate that stuff doesn't happen in schools across the country. It's unfortunate that arts is the first thing to cut funding from. Generally, it's almost always the first thing that they'll remove funding from. And the thing that's so important about the arts is the arts is all around us. Every time when you set foot in your home, anything that's designed, from clothing to furniture to that ketchup bottle, that was all designed by someone that is an artist of some form. Your house was built and designed by someone who is an artist. Now, mathematics plays a huge part in that, but it still is an artistic thing. The design of a house, the design of clothing, the signs that are everywhere that you drive, someone sits down, either back in the day, and they used to draw those signs out and then they would approve them and then they would get them built. Now it's all done on computers, but it's all the same thing. The arts actually have built the world that we live in. When you are feeling low or feeling high or feeling whatever, music, 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 music. That is all the arts. Television, that is the arts. Painting, books, all of that stems from the arts, and that our government does not understand the importance of the arts and that they want to remove funding is such a terrible thing. So we are so blessed that we grew up in a school system that wanted that to be a part of it, because another wonderful thing about being a part of the arts is there's a social aspect that is involved where you are able to, not only is it about getting along with other students and other things like that, because that's what school is for, you also get that in sports as well. But there's something about, there's a confidence builder that also comes with being in the arts, knowing how to carry yourself, knowing how to perform on stage is different, I think, than playing football or playing basketball. It's a very different thing knowing how to present yourself in a public forum. You know, and there are so many things that are so important. Being part of a community as a dancer, like sports, but there's something about, not only do you have to know where you are and what your choreography is, you need to know what this person's choreography is, how to move around each other. You're not trying to get the ball so you can make the basket. We are all collectively trying to make this piece work together as a unit. You work as an ensemble. That stuff actually translates into everyday life. You may never become a dancer or a singer or an actor, but all of those values that you learn, the hard work it takes to devote yourself to those crafts is not easy. But then when you go get that job at that corporation, you have this training behind you. Immediately working with large groups of people, knowing what your part is and how that part feeds into the larger group is a very easy thing because you already had that training.
So Kayla's popped on, which means that somebody asked a question. And so
one of the ones that ties into kind of what we talked about before and was emailed, it was emailed beforehand through the website, and it ties into this. James, you talked about when Dr. Acosta and I spoke with you beforehand, not considering yourself an activist, but an artist, and how that plays into your daily life. And I didn't know if you could touch a little bit on that. It goes with one of the questions that I had on my list to ask that was emailed.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know, interestingly enough, in this time that we're in, I don't consider myself an activist. I did say this because I've also spoken a lot on the things that we're dealing with in this country right now. And I have my feelings about that. So, you know, I have definitely posted on social media things, or I'll take something that someone else has posted that affects me and that I believe in, or maybe I disagree with, and I will say the things that I feel that are on my heart. But for me, I don't really consider that to be an activist in my world. What I had said is I'm a citizen. I'm a concerned citizen, and I am affected by the way things are in this world, and I have opinions about how I feel like it'd be cool if people maybe behaved in this certain way or in that certain way. But yeah, activist, definitely not. But I'm certainly a citizen of this country and of this world.
So one of the things that you touched upon a little earlier was community in your community. So you grew up in the community of El Paso. Tell us what it was like to grow up in El Paso. I often hear, and I'm just going to give you like background. I often hear people say to me, well, El Paso's not a real racist place. We're not racist at all. And everybody kind of just accepts that to be true. But I think that comes from a perspective, like a Latino perspective, or it may come from a perspective that is white, or, you know, another race or ethnicity. And so I want to know, what was your life growing up like in El Paso? Tell us what you experienced and how that has shaped who you are. Because I actually have another question for you about a conversation we had, I think 2 years ago, on that specific issue. But can you tell us about what it was like to grow up in El Paso as an African-American man in a predominantly Latino community?
You know, it's kind of a two-sided thing. I actually really enjoyed growing up in El Paso. I'm grateful that I grew up. I tell people growing up in El Paso for me was growing up in a small city that had just enough of the drugs, just enough of the gangs, just enough. It had just enough of everything so that when I moved to a larger city, unlike some people that come from small towns and they move to a larger city and they have shell shock, I didn't have any of that, you know. So I enjoyed growing up in El Paso. I have so many fond memories. But yes, there were things, and I think I'm pretty much a happy-go-lucky. I think I was really very happy-go-lucky as a kid. So there are certain things that I didn't really see, but remembering like being called negrito and people laughing at me and stuff like that. And I know what the word negro is, and I also understand what negrito means. And someone tried to say to me one time that no, it just means, you know, it just means brown, like little brown boy. And I was like, okay, all right. If that's what you want to use it as, that's what you want to use it as. And someone also told me that they got called, someone who's Mexican said that they used to get called that. And I was like, okay, and I have no answer to that. But when it was directed to me, I knew it wasn't, hey, little brown boy. Not with the tone that it was used with.
And I think tone matters.
Tone always matters, you know, especially with stuff like that. I can tell, so yes, dealing with stuff like that, but again, because the people like going to Bel Air High School, even junior high school, I had just friends there, people that I cared about, people that cared about me. So because I was inside of that community, surprisingly sometimes where I look back and I'm like, I don't know why these people talk to me, but they did. And but I will tell you this, that I experienced racism coming back to El Paso as an adult. When I'm now, like, my eyes are open from going, I'll bring this up. So we spoke a little earlier, I was in the Navy, and that was also posted from somebody out there. And one of the first times that racism actually really hit me was, interestingly enough, in the Navy. And it was on base. There's a little area, like we call it the commissary area, where there was a store and there was a McDonald's and there was a barbershop and the electronics store, and you could just go get stuff there that you didn't have to go off base to get. And there's a restroom. And I went to the store, got my things. I went to McDonald's, had some food. I was like, gotta go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom, and I'm sitting there, and on the stall wall, it said, "Niggers go home." And I just went, but I'm on base. I'm on a military base. That is not supposed to be part of this world. And then somewhere else it had like a swastika, and I just kind of was not prepared for that. And then, you know, then you're more and more in life. And then I remember coming back to El Paso and just getting treated a certain way, looked at a certain way, sometimes not treated, meaning I would go to get something and the response would just be like, we don't want to wait on you, but we're going to wait on you, but we're going to take our time. And you're going to get it when you get it, kind of situation. And one particular incident, I guess I shouldn't use the name of the place because I don't want you to get in trouble. But there's a restaurant that we all know that's in El Paso. It's a diner-y type restaurant, I'll just say that. And they have really good pancakes there, and I love pancakes. So after going out one night, and it was open late, I wanted pancakes to go so I could go home and eat all of the pancakes and go to sleep. I went in. I was the only person in the establishment. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And it took them forever to just come to me and ask me what I wanted, because they were all hanging out in the back, and I walk in. When you're the only person, it should take you 10 seconds to go, "Hey, we'll be right there. Hold on a second." No one said anything. They looked at me, but they didn't say anything. So I waited because I was hungry and I'm patient. They finally came. It took them like a minute, and that's a long time. They took my order, and I sat there and I waited. It doesn't take that long to make pancakes. I can tell you that. I make pancakes a lot. And I waited, and I was tired. So, you know, I started to fall asleep a little bit, and then I would wake up. And they were hanging out in the back by the doors of the kitchen, looking at me, talking, giggling, talking. So I got up and I walked out. And that kind of stuff has happened to me in El Paso. It's happened to my family.
So do you still have family in El Paso?
I do. Yeah. I do. And unfortunately, it still happens. And I have my opinions about what I think it is. I don't know if I should share those opinions, but I have my opinions on why I think some Latinos, some Mexicans in particular, since El Paso is a Mexican city, why they may treat people that look like me and darker than me the way that they do. But it just exists.
You know, that's a very interesting comment, because there is colorism that we don't talk about. And the truth is, you're free to talk about what you want to talk about, because the truth is that this is the name of this series is Courageous Conversations, because
Sure.
people sometimes need a space to talk about those things, because you can't talk about them all the time. I often talk about the fact that when I was in San Diego, I went to go look at the wall that went into the ocean, and I was stopped. And I was with my husband, who is güero, you know, he looks like a white guy. And I was with him, and he was standing right next to me, and the Border Patrol agent was only talking to me. And so I asked him, am I being racially profiled? And he said, no. And I said, then why have you not asked my husband one single question? So all of those moments, and all of us have shared those moments or have experienced, a lot of people have, I can't say everybody has. And there are those moments that stick with you, because you think to yourself, and I'm sure you thought about in that moment, James, is it me? Like, am I exaggerating this? Like, is this really happening? Is this a microaggression, a macroaggression? Am I overthinking this? They just happened to ask me all the questions. But then as you go back in life, you reflect about those particular moments in your life, and they're like etched in your brain and etched in your soul. Those are the moments you can't forget, because how many times have you eaten pancakes, James? You make them every day. But I mean, that moment stuck with you because there's that feeling that goes with that moment. And so I appreciate you sharing that story, because these are courageous conversations and spaces where we can be vulnerable, and spaces where we can talk about things that ordinarily would cause other people, would cause arguments. But we're not here to argue. We're just here to talk. Let's just bring it out there. And that's what we need to do more. Kayla, I know you have a question.
No, so somebody commented, and I know James that you kind of had an emotion.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
James, somebody sent a comment in the chat, and I know you kind of had an emotional moment, so I don't want to dredge up anything, and I don't want us to pretend that you two are here to solve all the world's problems in an hour and a half. It would be nice if it was that simple, and I think the two of you could probably do it. But somebody commented, the difference between racism and prejudice, because especially a modern interpretation of racism requires power and privilege, which Black and brown and people of color do not always possess. But prejudice is something that can be present without that power dynamic. So is there anything that you want to add or discuss in the difference between racism and prejudice and what you've experienced, or just what's happening in our community, in the country in general? I just think that that's a really maybe deeper than we warned you that we were going to go, but I think it has a lot to do with what you guys are discussing.
Sure. And that's really,
I think the two of you could hash this out pretty.
That's that's an incredible question. That really, really is an incredible question. Thank you for posing that. The difference between racism and prejudice.
Well, they say racism has to do with privilege. Like, you can only be racist if you come from a place of privilege. And that's why when people say, well, brown people can't be racist because they don't come from a place, and this is now my scholarly person with through a racial justice lens from my dissertation, talking about the difference between racism and prejudice. And racism is a power dynamic. So when people say you're being reverse racist, that's impossible. Because for you to be reverse racist, you have to have had power and control of institutions and systems historically. So that's not my interpretation. That's the interpretation of scholars for what racism is. And so I just wanted to put that out there as you're thinking about that, James, and that question.
Yeah. Yes, period. But I mean, someone who has no power, who is just white, just because someone is white or another color, but I'll just stick with white right now, they have no power in this world beyond that they're standing on their own 2 feet and they're able to walk through this world as a hopefully stable human being. For that person to look at me or you and simply not like you and not want you to exist because of the color of your skin, for me, that is about my race. You can't be prejudiced because you don't know anything about me. So what else would it be? If you're just looking at me, it has to be racism. I think they both definitely exist, but I don't want someone to go, well, that person's just prejudiced. And I'm like, no, because what do you have to be prejudiced? If you don't know me, anything about me, and you're just seeing me and this is all you see, tell me what the prejudice is. What is it that you're prejudiced against? Are you just prejudiced against the color of my skin? I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, so these are tough conversations about issues that we as people encounter on a daily basis. And so I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about some of the posts that you've done. And believe me, James, I follow you just because I love your posts. Like, I mean, I'm not because I just love I love you too, but I love the posts too. And so one of the really interesting posts that I saw, you did like a 3-day series on a particular situation that I thought was very interesting, which is like a catcalling-ish. Am I saying it right?
It's my Dear Some Straight Guys posts, yeah.
Yeah, Dear Straight Guys posts.
Dear Some Straight Guys.
Some Straight Guys. Dear
Yes.
Some Straight Guys posts,
Yeah.
where you talk about kind of this aggression that occurs between straight men and gay men, and it's a very interesting dynamic. And yeah. I thought, I was really I had to sit down and kind of just think about it when you were talking about it, and I went through it several times, because for me, it really was a fascinating thing you were talking about. You want to talk a little bit about that post and talk about your experience, because truly what we're talking about today is intersectionality, because you have all of these intersections of a human being that you are. You are from El Paso. You do speak Spanish. You are African American. You are a gay man. You are on Broadway. You were in the Navy. You're all of those things at once. And that intersectionality of all of that has its own has its own situations that present themselves and are defined by what you know in your brain to be true or not true.
Sure.
Like, that's the only way you can define it, is by what you already think you know. And
Sure.
so I want you to talk about that, but I mean, if you want to talk about that, and I also I've enjoyed your post where you've posted about Karens that have been out there doing all these crazy things because of masks and other reasons. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your post, and you say you're not an activist. Because when we were talking about it, you're like, you're not an activist because you think that's a person that actually like is in the mindset to do this. You're a citizen, you observe things and you call them out or you question them. So talk about that.
Well, yeah, there are people, the people that I consider activists are those people that are actually leading a charge. You have people that not only do they have the knowledge about the situations, but they have a platform and an opinion, and they have the people behind them, and they are out there making actual change, actively making change. I'm me. So for me, I just say again, yeah, I'm a citizen. I live in this world and I see the things that I see, be they happening directly to myself or them happening to other people. And we all feel some kind of way about it. And I felt some kind of way about things most of my adult life when I could really express what those things were. And even when I was younger and I didn't know what it was that I was feeling exactly, I just knew that it touched me in some kind of way. And now we're in this time that I really truly believe that conversations, as we are doing, need to be had, because there are things that exist, so many things that exist, and we accept them because that's just the way things are. No. Why? We need to question why these things are and have these conversations, because if we can get to the root of it and we can at least have these conversations, then hopefully these generations that are coming up won't continue to do these things. So the simple thing that I started with that, Dear Some Straight Guys, was I was walking down the street and it was a hot day and I love a short, my legs are good. So I put a short on. It's what I do. And and it was also a rainy day, but none of that really matters. But I guess I'm setting the stage so I'm walking past up towards these two guys. Now, when you walk down the street, unless you're solely in your own world and you don't care about anybody else, and those people exist, and we could talk about those people because that's the subject as well. But when you walk down the street, you see people, you're clocking where you're going. You don't want to run into anybody. You see people because that's what you do. We take in our surroundings. So I saw the two guys because of where they were, and I was on my way. That was all the attention that I took on them. But when I saw them, I saw the shorter one lean into his friend and say something. And as I got up to where they were, the other one was like, yeah, you think? And the tone of his voice and the look on their face, I knew what it was. And in that moment, I had the thought that has come up so many times is, why do straight guys, not all of you, but why do some straight guys, when they see someone they assume is gay, whether they are or not, but you assume, why do you need to comment on it? It's not even about having the thought that you're clocking someone to decide what their sexuality is, and then you need to make a comment on it that is loud enough for now me to hear it, so now I actually am being drawn into your world. Why? I never really understood that. I'm like, you're paying enough attention to me to take in all of me to decide what you think I am and whether you approve of that or not. Why are you so interested? And I've always wondered that. Why are you so interested? When I see it happen to other gay men, I'm like, they're truly not paying any attention to you. It'd be one thing if they walk by and they were like, ooh, hey, yo, you're fucking hot, whatever. But none of that ever happens. Generally, people are on their own way trying to get their own thing done, and you are now intersecting into their world, because for some reason, you either think that what you say is going to cause them to feel some sort of shame or whatever, or maybe you want to start something, but you want to bring attention to yourself. So I was like, so what is that about? And that is something that those types of men need to ask themselves, which is what the whole post was about. And to also start the conversation, because you may have a younger brother who's that way. You may have a nephew or something like that. And if you can catch that kind of behavior at a younger age and go, you don't have to do that. Let those people live their life the way that you're living your life. Period. There's no reason to do that. There's no reason to, if your main goal solely is to cause this person shame, to make them feel some kind of way that's negative, stop it. That's another one of those problems that's just the way the world is. Why does it just have to be that way? So that post then segued into the situation that we have all these trans women who are being brutally murdered. Same situation is generally, I can guarantee you, maybe more often than not, these people are just trying to go about their lives and live their fullest, best life. So something about their existence bothers you immensely, enough to go beyond calling them names and catcalling to actively killing them. So again, I ask the question, what is it about you that sits in your spirit that deeply that you actually want to go out and kill someone because they're not like you? There's an issue right there. I'm like, rather be this person who's trying to live their best and their most truthful life than someone who has that much darkness inside of them, that much evil, that much pain, that much aggression, that much anger, that you want to actually kill another human being. It's something that needs to be talked about, because again, if it can be nipped in the bud at a very young age, for people to know we all have a right to walk through this earth on this planet in the best way that we know how and live a good life. There are so many different types of people on this planet that have so many different personalities, and we think that they're, from the way things have been, there's a straight male, there's a straight female, and that's all that it's supposed to be. And then somewhere gay people came in, and it's just like, no, we're not supposed to. Gay people are bad. They're demons, and there's devils, and they're going to go to hell, and they're going to burn. Gay people have been around for a long time. Gay things have been around for a long time. There are things in nature that are gay. There are organisms and animals in nature that can change their sexuality. So I say, if this being that we are made in the image of created in nature things that are homosexual, that are asexual, that are trisexual, that are all sexual, why wouldn't they do the same? Why wouldn't it be the same for us human intelligent beings? We all have a right to be on this planet. So then that took it into the next thing, which was Dear Some Straight Guys, because a woman commented on my post saying that, well, that happens to me too, about getting catcalled. And I was like, yes, I do understand that. And I was like, but it's not the same thing, because you're a straight dude trying to make fun of or call attention to a gay male in a negative way is not the same as what straight men do to women, and which is terrible. And it annoys me to no end. And sometimes it makes me so angry, as it does with gay men. But what happens I watched this thing happen, and I've seen it several times, where it was a group of about 7 or 8 guys. These were all black guys, young 20s, 18s, 19s, 20s, somewhere in that age bracket. And these 2 really beautiful girls, and were walking past this group. So they're like walking. And of course, dudes, they were all like click. And so the girls just they're trying to get on their way. So they go on their way, and the catcalling starts, and the yo mama, da, 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 da. One dude actually reached out and grabbed the girl in the ass department and was just like, zoop. And of course, what is the girl going to do? She can't do anything, because if she's that kind of girl that's going to do something, she might get her ass beat, because there's those guys that are just as keen to beat a girl up just to prove that they're a man amongst their boys. Because you're not going to let some woman talk back to me in front of all my boys. So I'm going to fucking kick your ass. But the fact, so these two girls, all they did was, and I saw her just go like this, and they walked faster to get away from the guys. And the guys were like, yo, 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 yo. And I was like, this type of behavior, it exists. And we accept it as part of how men are just supposed to be in this world.
I am just so glad you are a citizen of the world. That's all I got to say, because everything that you've said right now touches on so many issues of people inflicting pain on other people, or inflicting their own biases on other people just because, instead of letting people live their lives to the fullest. And so when we started this conversation, we named this session Leading with Love. And I think, James, that's exactly what you personify. Like, everything that you say is so passionate, and it is right on, but it's all said from a place of kindness and of love, but of strength and of observation and empowerment. And so before Kayla asked the next question, I just wanted to say that to you, because you're truly an example of how we should learn to talk to each other, even when you're calling someone out. And a lot of people need to be called out. I'm just going to put that pin right there and leave it there. Go ahead, Kayla.
James, one of our board members actually, she's having trouble in the chat, but she texted me. And I know you talked about Black Lives Matter, but to talk a little bit about racism in theater, in the arts, in film. I know there was the Oscars So White campaign, but what has your experience been, specifically your experience in theater and in the arts?
My experiences personally with racism, some of them are mild is an interesting word to use. Especially as I've heard the stories that I've heard from some of my peers, where I haven't really had to deal with those types of things, but I have definitely dealt with my share of things, such as simple as when you're in an audition room, and not in an audition room, or you're in a working room and you're putting a show together, and the choreographer is white, the director is white, the writer is white, but they're telling a Black story. There, right there, for me, is an issue, but it's something that we deal with in this business because we are actors and we want to work. You know what I mean? But then you have moments where they'll be like, well, can you do that a little more funky, a little more urban? Can you say that a little more street? And what they're asking you to say is, can you be more Black? But they can't say that, but those things happen. And all we can do as professionals, as performers in this business who love what we do, is go, yeah, that's that. So we gonna do it like this, yo. That's what I'm. So, and they're like, yeah, that's it. And then you're like, okay, but I actually don't speak that way. But okay, because that's how you see us. All right. So those types of things happen. One of the things that happened to me before I moved to New York, and I was in Las Vegas and doing a show called Enter the Night that was at the Stardust Hotel and Casino. Amazing show. But this was the first time I actually experienced racism in a way where I wasn't going to be allowed to do something, not because I wasn't good enough to do it, but because of the color of my skin. There was a moment in the show where the song Unforgettable, we all know and love that song, was being sung. Now, this was a Vegas show, so if you like an old school Vegas show, so it was a topless show, but it was a beautiful show, like still one of the most beautiful shows of that nature that I'd seen. And so at this moment in the show, the singer is sitting on the passer rail. So there's a rail that goes around the theater in an arc. So he's sitting there singing, "Unforgettable, that's what you are." And this really pretty blonde girl is coming in, and she's just dancing, and she's doing all this stuff, and her hair is falling. She has this really beautiful nighty thing on, and she comes up and caresses his face, and they do this thing, and then she goes up into this thing that takes her up into the ceiling, and as she goes up into the ceiling, the thing kind of falls off her shoulder, and it's really sexy and romantic and yada yada yada. So I was rehearsing the song because I was one of the singers in the show, and I was like, well, I should know this song as well. I love this song. I should be able to sing it. And the person who was the musical director was kind of like, you don't really need to learn that song, like you know. But I worked on it anyway, and he couldn't quite tell me why it was that I didn't need to work on that song. I worked on every other song in the show, whether I was good enough to sing it or not, and I knew I could sing that song. So I couldn't understand the reluctance and why they wouldn't allow me to sing that song. Then I spoke to a friend of mine who was in the show prior to me, who became a dear, dear friend of mine. Silky voice, like if anyone could sing the song, he could sing the song better than anybody. And he was like, I was telling him about the situation, and he was like, James, they're never gonna let you sing that song. And I was like, but why not? This is me, hopeful me, innocent me, not naive. And not even innocent. I just see things in a certain way, and I lead from a certain place. And he was like, because you're Black. And he was like, they finally told me that when I was in the show. They didn't want a Black person being seen as a love interest, as a sexual interest to this beautiful blonde woman. Now we're in the 90s here. This is 95. And I just kind of went, whoa. Because the audience is somehow going to get upset, and they're going to want their money back or something like that because a Black guy is singing and a white woman is dancing, and they caress and they have a moment together. Okay, we are still in this world in the 90s. Now we move forward to my first Broadway show, and I'm on tour. Now nothing happened to me directly, but we're on tour with Aida. If anybody knows about Aida, it was Disney's show based on an opera about Egyptians and Nubians. Now, we know anything truly about history, we know Egyptians are not Liz Taylor. We know Egyptians are not white, they're not blonde, they don't have blue eyes, they don't have any of that. But in this show, they are being depicted as white. And the Nubians are depicted as what they were, is dark Black people. So in Aida, Radames falls in love with Aida. Aida is Black, Radames is blonde. We get down south, and there were places where they would bus students in to see these shows. In certain places down south, they wouldn't bus the students in because they didn't want the students to see a show where a white man leaves a white woman to fall in love to be with a Black woman, and was willing to risk his life and his kingdom and everything to be with this Black woman. Now we're in 2002. And I couldn't, and that was, the reason was stated, is like, we don't want our children to see this type of show dealing with this adult subject matter.
Wow. 2000 what? What, 2002?
That was in 2002. So, and these are big enough stories, but they're smaller stories in comparison to people who have been told things to their face, people who things have been taken from them because they wanted what they had to offer, and it was created by someone who was Black, but they didn't want to give that creative credit to that person beyond a paycheck. They didn't want to give them the face saying, this is the person that created this. We're going to take that story from you. Here's some money, sit over there. We're going to tote you around to our investors and such, but you also need to sit over there while we tell this story that you wrote about your culture. So yeah, that's some of the things that happen with racism in the theater industry, and there's also the other stuff that it gets spoken about is like casting and stuff. I have my opinions on that don't necessarily jive with other Black people in show business, but just one of the things is we also need to, as we live on this planet today, in societies where there are all walks of life, there are still plenty of places, unfortunately, in this country where it is still the whiter sins, because that is just how that neighborhood, that little town began, and that is what it's grown into, and they're still primarily white, and that is what it is. But when you look at the makeup of this country still, there are all ethnicities that live in this country. Even in El Paso, because there's a military base, and El Paso used to be a white city, and then as the Mexicans came, sorry, I didn't want that to sound, but as Mexicans came across the border, it has become more of a Mexican city. And like when I go home, for me, it's always been a Mexican city. But once I did a little history, I was like, okay, well, then that makes sense. But even in El Paso, because you have a military base, you have white people, you have Chinese people, you have all sorts of walks of life that exist in that city. I would say a lot of cities in this country have every race. So in theater, we're like, we need to tell stories where if I'm sitting in the audience, or if you're sitting in the audience, or if an Asian person is sitting in the audience, or an Indian person is sitting in the audience, or a Greek person is sitting in the audience, that they feel like they are represented, that we're not continuously looking up on the stage and seeing mostly white people with one Black person, or maybe two Black people in the show. Heaven forbid we have an Asian in the show, though there are more Asians in this country, but for some reason in show business, they're not written into shows. We don't see any Native Americans represented at all in show business, really at all. Yet, this is the makeup of our country. This country was founded by immigrants from all other places, but we don't treat it like that in Hollywood. And Filipinos, baby, look, there's very little representation of Filipinos in this business. Thank you for posting that comment. And having been to the Philippines, Filipinos sing down. Can I tell you? Filipinos sing down the talent and the da-da-da. But anyway, that's besides the point. We live in a world where we should all be represented. We should all be able to go in somewhere and feel like we are there. If it's a specific white story, where I have said in the past, where I'm like, if it's 1930 and it's Europe, no, there shouldn't be any Black people in that story, because unless they were cleaning that person's house or something, they probably weren't there in that society of people. So we don't need to insert Black people into that story just to have colorblind casting. But if we're building new stories, or there are certain things, why isn't that a Black couple? Why isn't that an interracial couple that just found out that their son or daughter has encephalitis and they're trying to deal with that in the guise of their everyday life, and their daughter wants to get married? And those stories happen to everyone. They don't only happen to white people. So why isn't there, as stories are being told, whether they're true or made up, that represent everyone in this business? And it's getting better. And now we're having the conversations. So we have to look to see what the future is going to bring.
Dr. Costa, James, we're about
Out of time.
Out. No, we're not out of time. Before
Bye.
I think Dr. Costa probably has a good final question for you, but I wanted, when we first posted this and I got a lot of questions, and in the Q&A we got a lot of questions about advice for people in El Paso who want to follow in your footsteps, who want to go into show business, or just, just a general kind of like happy what you experienced, or any tips for what people can do, or even just anything that we I think have a lot of theater kids too. I know I was a theater kid, so just something.
Yeah, Kayla was a theater kid, and so when we first met with James, Kayla was just super excited to meet him. So that would be great. James, can you share some tips for the dreamers that we have in our community that would love to one day be on Broadway themselves or be on film? Or
first of all, it still blows my mind that there are theater kids in El Paso, Texas. We didn't have that when I was a kid. So I love it. My advice is always the same. From the curriculum part, learn everything that you can learn. I wish that I knew more than I knew, because I would be better than I am now. So don't close yourself off to anything. If it's something that you find hard, I say work harder at it, so that you can be that thing that we achieve to be as a triple threat. But beyond that, just really open yourself up to learning everything. I'm really kind of blessed where not only do I dance and sing and then act, but I'm also a writer. I'm a songwriter. But I've directed, I have choreographed, I have done so many wonderful things. And that is because I have kept myself open to all facets of the business. And I'm curious that way. I have to do it. But learn everything that you can learn. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's something that happens a lot of times, where the teacher will go, hey, has everybody got it? Or does anyone have any questions? And no one wants to raise their hand, because you don't want to feel stupid. You don't want to feel whatever. You want to show that you got it. If you don't got it, then, and you walk out of that class, you're never going to get it. So ask the questions that you need to ask, because those are the things that are going to make you better. And follow your heart. Whatever that is, follow your heart. And we're not taught that in this country. We're taught to follow the dollar. So you have a lot of people in this country and in the world who are working in jobs that they don't love, that they don't care for, that bring them more pain and heartache and uncomfort. That's not a word, but let's make it a word. That cause them unhappiness. But they have gotten into situations in life where this is all they know, and they have to put food on the table, or now they're making tons of money, but they're not happy. You can do something in your life that brings you happiness and make money. You may not make tons of money, or you might luck into it and make tons of money, but just follow your heart. And I can just guarantee you that you'll be happy wherever it is that you end up. And if it ends up being on the stage, that is awesome.
Just to wrap this up, because we're coming to the end of our virtual session, some people want to know if you're ever coming back to El Paso, and if you're ever opening a dance studio, in El Paso. And by the way, one thing that I didn't mention is that I saw you have the James Corner on Wiggles. Like, I used to watch the Wiggles. So are you, you're on the Wiggles as well?
I'm part of the Wiggles that kind of brought me in, and they created this show around me called The James Cafe.
The James Cafe.
The James Cafe. You can find it on YouTube. Please go watch. Seriously, if you can type in The James Cafe on YouTube, watch them. They're so much fun, and I'm not saying that because I'm part of it. I finally got to watch some because when we did them so long ago, and when they came out, I was like, I forgot all about that, and that's awesome. So yeah, please go watch them. Yes, I'm part of that in its own umbrella. I'm so blessed for that. When am I coming back to El Paso? Aside from coming back home to just visit my people and my mother and my siblings, I have no idea. In a dance studio in El Paso, my goodness. I don't know. I talked to Sylvia. There is something that I would love to do in El Paso, and I don't know how that's going to come to pass. But if it ever does, I'm sure that we'll find ways to get the word out there. But there is something that I want to do, and I wanted to start at Bel Air High School, and be for those students and stuff that are there. And maybe if it's something that works at Bel Air High School, it can spread out through other high schools in El Paso community, just to let the younger generation know that there are so many more avenues than you realize that extend outside of El Paso, that of life that is out there for you to go and get. So
really fast, Benjamin Bettis, who is the son of a YWCA employee, he's on, and he's the band director. So we should try to connect you guys, because he does great things there, and his mom works with all of us. So I think that would be awesome.
He's the band director at Bel Air High School. So
that's crazy.
I know. So yes, James, you have a great idea. We're going to work on that. But so I will, like I said to you, it seems like every holiday season we have these reunions at Bel Air, and you know, the last time I saw James was there actually. And so I just want to let everybody know that, and we're going to nominate him for Honored X at Bel Air, just putting that out there. Because I just think that one of the things that we're trying to do with these sessions as well is show that exactly what you're talking about, James, is that the kids from El Paso, our community members, are everything. They can be everything and anything anywhere. They can compete with the best. They can outshine the best. That's the talent that we have in this community. And by highlighting somebody like James, who went out, took a chance, big risk, and now he's starting on Broadway, he's a son of our community that we should be extremely, extremely proud of. And so I just want to say, on behalf of the YWCA El Paso, and on behalf of all the Highlanders, and probably Sleta School District and all the other school districts, but on behalf of El Paso, we're just so glad that you took the time to chat with us, James, and that you spent some moments with us. I don't know if you have any final words you'd like to share, but I'm sure that we would all love to hear them.
Sure. You know, we were talking about leading with love, which is this thing that has just come to be something that I have been utilizing, and as like a platform in a way. So I looked up the word love, and aside from all the things that we know love to be, you know, and sexual attraction and, you know, those types of things, two of the definitions of love, and I'm leaning over so I can read them, is what I was speaking about leading with love, is love being the fatherly concern for humankind, brotherly concern for others. So when I talk about leading with love, is how you choose to step through your day-to-day life and how those things can affect everyone around you. And if you are coming from that place of good in your heart, and I know that that's different for everybody, and so it can be a little bit tricky, but we all know when we love someone, what that feeling is like. And if you can utilize that in the simplest of things, I do believe that spreads through the community, and it hits one person. And if everyone, as wildly naive as that may sound, as wildly optimistic as that may sound, if everyone could operate from that place, from a place of good, it would make all the difference. So that's what I hope for, and that's what I encourage people to do. Not always the easiest thing to do, but try.
Well, thank you for leading with love, and thank you for leading with kindness, and thank you for caring so much about our community, and thank you for your words, because they really have impacted so many people. And I think it was a really important conversation that we had, because really what you talked about, you don't have spaces like this in many places to be able to have these conversations. And I'm so glad that you were open enough to have this discussion with us. And I really, really appreciate it, James. I can hardly wait to see you again on Broadway. And I know that Kayla's going to say something, so I'm just going to step back.
No, I was just gonna one more time plug the Race Against Racism. That will help make events like this possible throughout the rest of the year. And then whenever, Dr. Costa, if you want to finish up, but you two don't leave because I didn't get a smiling picture of you at the beginning, so I want to take a screenshot of you guys smiling.
Okay.
So I just didn't want you guys to jump off before I got to say that.
I only do this.
And I'll do it too.
Yeah, I've seen your headshot, so I believe that.
Well, thank you, James. Thank you for being here. I will see you next time you're in town. And I can't hardly wait for Broadway to open up again and to be able to watch the show again. And I encourage those of you that travel to New York. I was just having a conversation with my friend Rebecca this morning. And we were talking about the fact that, you've got to go watch this show. And so I know that that there'll be a lot of people that'll go out to just wish you the best and send you love. So thank you for being a part of this. And thank you for going out there and showing what El Paso is all about to all these other communities. We are so proud of you, and we are so thankful for you. And with that, I think we have to take a picture, but I'd like to thank everybody who joined us and who is still with us. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you. We're going to have another series, another one coming up, I think, in the next several weeks, but just tune into the YWCA. So, James, this will be available if you want to send it out, or if you want to email it. So thank you to all of you. James and I are going to take a picture now, so it's going to be a little awkward for about 5 seconds. So I don't know, Kayla, are you on, or what are you doing?
You two, so if you just want to smile. Okay, got it. I don't know if you want to do a mood one, a headshot one.
A serious one?
Yeah.
Wait, you want a serious one?
To show your
now
range.
serious. Now serious.
Show your range.
I need lipstick.
Perfect. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you so much, James. And you take care, and we will talk to each other soon. I'll be following you, checking out what you're talking about. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of your friends were on. You had your own fan club over here.
It was so really, I saw some of the comments popping up, so thank you guys so much for watching that. It really does mean a lot. As I said to Sylvia a couple of times talking about this, is there so many people that I've worked with all of these years that they go home and they're like in their high school, they're in their school newspaper, they're in their hometown newspaper, and I've never really had that from El Paso. So for it to happen like this is incredible, and I truly feel such an honor. And so many of you out there, I just appreciate you taking the time. And I saw the one comment from the Austin Panthers, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what your sign, like Go Panther. I don't know. I think that may be the Tigers. I don't know what they are. I know they're the Panthers, but I don't know what you're like. Is it this?
I don't remember either.
That's Rattlers at St. Mary's. But anyway, so thank you, James, for doing this. And absolutely, we're so proud of you, and we're so glad. And quite frankly, you live our mission. You live our mission every day. So we are so proud to have you on this conversation, on this courageous conversation, because we talked about some things that are tough to talk about. But I think, people need to hear those. Yeah, people need to hear this.
Sure.
I think I'll end it before we go through everyone's high school signs.
I know. Okay. Thank you. You have to keep us in line, Kayla. It's you.
You guys could keep going forever, but
we could. We'll just call each other later. Bye. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.